Actually, I wanted to ask you about your gateway drug. What was what was your entry into the Duran Duran world?
So I would say, it's funny because I've been thinking about that and trying to figure out. I think it was the wedding album. So I'm a little bit younger. I was an '80s kid, but I wasn't, I wasn't watching MTV. I was too young and things like that. But it was the wedding album. I was kind of, I was a kid. I was, coming home after school, and I was starting to watch MTV. And the videos for Ordinary World and Come Undone and Too Much Information. Those were like the three that MTV was playing a ton, and at the same time the radio station. So I grew up in Cleveland, and we had a really good alternative rock station
The
that had
end?
just started. The End, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, that. So it was so good, and they played Duran Duran. And so those like, and so that was like my first entry, and which is, and that was, obviously, as fans will tell you, that was kind of like their like resurgence in
Mhm.
America. That it
Yeah.
was during the grunge era. They were making these beautiful power ballads and these kind of cool electronic music, and that came back. And Duran Duran was very, very popular in Cleveland from the very beginning, because I mean, David Bowie and Brian Ferry were super, super popular in Cleveland, and Duran Duran was so influenced by them. It just resonated so well with audiences. Like, they played in Cleveland on their first US tour, and they did an off date when they were touring with Blondie in '82. They did an off date in Cleveland too, which is cool, at the legendary Agora. So, but yeah, that was my gateway. And I guess at the same time, just because I mean, and you will probably remember in the early '90s, like kind of '80s alternative, like flashback lunches and
Yeah,
flashback, were so
true.
big on alternative stations. And so all of that early Duran Duran stuff too was sort of filtering in as well. And so I think I ended up picking up Decade at some point on CD, because it was, probably in our used record store and things like that. And I just, I kind of went backwards from there. I was able to get vinyl really cheap, just because no one was collecting at that time. So I got their debut and Rio.
Really? So
So
you've always been a vinyl girl. So even in the 90s, you were
I
collecting.
did. And it's
Wow.
funny because I don't know if I have no idea, in hindsight. I was trying to think, I'm like, what was my mindset as a teenager that I was, picking up vinyl, maybe because
Hmm.
it was cheap, or maybe because I was just like, oh, I'm really obsessed with this. But yeah, I saw Duran Duran for the first time in '97 on the Medazzaland tour. And I knew all of like the early stuff, but I realized it's because I had the records on vinyl, and I would be listening to them on my parents' turntable. So for whatever reason, I always gravitated toward it. Maybe because I was a big '80s music fan always. And so of course, I was like, oh, the vinyl, the art is so cool. And it's a lot, not as compact as CDs, and it just had a different listening experience. But yeah,
Oh, I agree totally.
That is a
Um,
music appreciator for sure. But that's
yes.
funny. You don't hear many people. That was a very good question, Dave. You assume that it's Rio or Planet Earth, but you are, if you're younger, um, the gateway to Duran.
yeah.
What was your entry into Duran Duran? You rarely hear Wedding Album.
But it's weird is that, I like it's one of the things, the band like always felt like they were there though, because I feel like at the same time, I feel like maybe VH1 must have played
Yeah.
Rio and Hungry Like the Wolf, because that video was just, it's so familiar to me. Like every time I see it, I know every nook and cranny. And obviously I've read it on YouTube, but it's just, they've just always been there. It's almost like they're just such a part of pop culture in America that, I just sort of, they're just such a steady presence. So yeah.